In a remote mountain valley, a widowed woman was about to claim a bargain shed. What started as a hopeful step toward rebuilding her life took a shocking turn when she came face to face with a cougar inside. Elara Monroe wasn't your typical homesteader. For years, she had survived loss and hardship, known for her quiet resilience. When she encountered the cougar prowling in the shadows, she had no idea she was stepping into destiny. The mountain and her life would never be the same. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The county courthouse smelled of mildew and old paper, the kind of scent that clung to small towns where history refused to be washed away. Elara Whitlock sat in the back row, arms folded across her chest, head slightly bowed, as if the shadows of the room offered more comfort than the thin sunlight streaming through the high windows. The auctioneer's voice droned with the cadence of a man who'd done this too many times, reading numbers, rattling off forgotten parcels of land, glancing up only to catch the nods of men who had already carved up most of this valley for cattle, timber or speculation. When the shed came up, it was presented almost like a joke. Lot 47B, one outbuilding on less than an acre. No access road. Structure condemned. Starting bid $3. Laughter rippled through the handful of farmers and landmen. Nobody lifted their hand. It was a scrap, a leftover, not worth the effort of a new survey. Elara raised her fingers, quietly, deliberately, as if every ounce of her hesitation was swallowed by that small gesture. Sold, the auctioneer muttered, surprised but indifferent. A few heads turned toward her, the reclusive Whitlock woman back from nowhere, buying something no sane person wanted. Their stares followed her as she signed the papers, their silence louder than the dusty room itself. By the time she left the courthouse, a faint drizzle had begun to fall, soaking into the cracked sidewalks of the town. She pulled her hood low. The deed felt weightless in her pocket, yet heavy with something unnamed. The hike took most of the afternoon. There was no road, no trail, only overgrown paths where deer and elk had passed. The Bitterroot Range rose on either side, jagged granite shoulders holding the clouds low. Her boots slipped on wet moss, her breath fogged in the cooling air. It had been years since she'd moved through a country like this, and muscle memory guided her. Step light, watch for loose shale, listen to the rhythm of wind and bird. For the first time in months, she felt something other than numbness, though she wasn't ready to call it purpose. She found the land by accident more than navigation. A clearing opened before her, hemmed in by spruce and pine. The shed stood at its center, leaning rust-eaten roof, walls warped as if the forest itself wanted to swallow it. Grass and thorn grew high around the foundation. Elara stopped at the edge of the clearing, still as a deer scenting a hunter. Something was wrong. Not just decay, not just silence, but a tension in the air. She walked forward, boots sinking into the wet ground. On the trunks of nearby trees, she noticed claw marks. Long, deliberate gouges, fresher than they should have been for a place so abandoned. Her stomach tightened. She circled the shed. The lock on the door was old, but intact, rust crusting its edges. The wood smelled damp, sour. She placed her palm flat against the door. That was when she heard it, movement. A low scrape from within, followed by a sound that froze her chest. An animal's growl. Hollow with exhaustion, yet edged with menace. Elara staggered back, her breath catching in her throat. Her instincts warred. The scientist in her catalogued the sound, the pattern of breathing, the weight of claws against wood. The grieving mother in her wanted to run, to seal herself back in the safety of her isolation. She crouched low, eyes level with a gap in the boards. For an instant, a pair of eyes glinted back, golden, rimmed with shadow, the unmistakable gaze of a predator. Her heart hammered, but she didn't move. She couldn't. The world seemed to hold its breath. The cougar's growl faded into silence, leaving only the drum of rain on the tin roof. Elara remained crouched, staring at the darkness within. She had come here for solitude, to disappear into forgotten land. But what was locked inside that shed had other plans. She rose slowly, forcing her hands steady as she tightened her jacket around her. Night was coming fast, the clouds bruising into deeper shades. She took one last look at the locked door before retreating toward the edge of the clearing. Every step back through the forest carried a weight she hadn't felt in years. She had wanted an empty retreat. Instead, she had inherited a mystery that breathed. Behind her, from the shed, came one last sound. Not a growl this time. A heavy thud, like something or someone testing the chains. Elara didn't run, but she knew she wouldn't sleep that night. The shed was no longer just a structure on a forgotten acre. It was a question she could not ignore. And inside, waiting was an answer she might not be ready to face. The forest did not sleep, but Elara barely closed her eyes. Her cabin, miles from the shed, offered thin walls against the sounds of the Bitterroot Range, the distant calls of owls, the restless whisper of wind in the pines, the occasional crack of shifting branches. But her mind circled back to those eyes. Gold, rimmed with hunger and something more, awareness. She rose before dawn, pulled on her boots, and set a pot of bitter coffee on the wood stove. Her reflection in the cabin's cracked mirror startled her. She looked gaunt, eyes bruised with shadows, hair tied in a rough knot. This wasn't the woman she had been, biologist, wife, mother. That woman had burned away years ago in the fire. Now she was just Elara Whitlock, hermit. A rumor that haunted the edge of town, but rumors didn't explain the cougar in the shed. By mid-morning, she shouldered her pack, filled with what supplies she could manage: bolt cutters, jerky, a battered first aid kit, and her field notebook, her one link to the scientist she used to be. The forest trail seemed tighter, as if the trees leaned in to whisper doubts. Her boots carried her anyway. The clearing looked unchanged in the daylight. But the air carried a tang she couldn't ignore, rot mixed with the musk of predator. She knelt by the shed door, pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. She slid the bolt cutters from her pack, then stopped. The lock wasn't just rusted shut. It was reinforced with chain, newer than the rest of the structure. Someone had made sure this door stayed closed. She whispered under her breath, "What the hell are you doing, Whitlock?" A growl rumbled from within, low and unmistakable. Elara froze, every nerve alive. Slowly she pulled back. Through the crack in the boards, the eyes appeared again, fixed on her. They burned with hunger, yes, but also intelligence. She felt the weight of its gaze, not just watching, but measuring. Her training took over. She crouched, drew her notebook, and began scribbling. Adult mountain lion, likely male, but malnourished. Behavior inconsistent. Pacing marks on floor visible through slats. No obvious food remains. She flipped the page, hand trembling. Why locked? Who would keep a cougar here? She tossed a strip of jerky through the gap. A heavy thud followed, then a snarl. The jerky vanished. Another thud, harder this time, rattled the boards. The shed shuddered as the cougar hurled its weight against the walls. Elara stumbled back, breath ragged. Something inside this animal pulsed with more than starvation. Elara Whitlock? The voice cut through the clearing like a rifle shot. She spun, hand instinctively gripping the knife at her belt. A man stepped from the trees, uniform green and brown, badge catching a shaft of sunlight. Sawyer Grant, the local game warden. She remembered him from years ago, young, brash, the one who had asked too many questions about poaching in the valley. Time had added lines to his face, and his smile now carried weariness instead of arrogance. "You're trespassing on county property," Sawyer said lightly, though his eyes darted to the shed. "Or maybe not trespassing anymore. Heard you bought this lot at auction." Elara straightened. "You're a long way from your patrols," Cougar reports. He nodded toward the shed. "Guess I don't have to ask twice." The growl inside rose, guttural, violent. Sawyer's hand hovered near his sidearm. "You can't shoot it," Elara snapped. His eyes flicked to her, surprised. "And you think leaving it in there is better?" "It's not just an animal," she said, more sharply than intended. He studied her as if weighing whether she meant superstition or science. Then his expression softened with something like pity. "You're still chasing ghosts, Whitlock. Haven't you had enough?" The word struck deeper than she wanted to admit. She turned away, jaw clenched. The Cougar slammed the walls again, dust rising in the shafts of light. "Something's wrong here," she muttered. "You don't say." Sawyer sighed, rubbed his temple. "Look, I'll file a report, call Fish and Wildlife. They'll send a crew, and they'll put it down," Elara said. His silence confirmed it. Elara knelt again, staring into the crack. The Cougar's eyes locked with hers, unwavering. "Watcher!" Mara Wynn's voice echoed in her mind. One of the old mountain tales Elara had dismissed years ago. A spirit guardian. A predator that punished trespassers. She had laughed back then. She wasn't laughing now. Sawyer shifted his weight. "Let's head back before dark. We'll get this sorted." But Elara shook her head. "No, not yet." He exhaled sharply, frustration edging his tone. "Always stubborn." The growl deepened, vibrating through the wood. For an instant, it didn't sound like an animal at all, but like the mountain itself, speaking through a throat of flesh and fang. Elara closed her notebook. Her hand brushed the scar on her wrist, the old burn, reminder of what she had lost. She whispered, too soft for Sawyer to hear, "I won't fail again." They left the clearing together, though not side by side. Sawyer's gaze kept drifting back, uneasy. Elara kept her eyes forward. The Cougar's stare burned into her memory. As the forest swallowed them, the shed groaned once more. A chain rattled. And far above, a raven circled, crying its harsh call into the dusk. The morning after the shed's revelation came brittle and cold, the air so thin it stung Elara Whitlock's throat as she chopped kindling. The Cougar's eyes haunted her every motion, those steady, burning orbs that had tracked her from the shadows of the rusted shed. She hadn't told anyone what she had found, not even Mara, though the woman's words had lingered. "The Watcher has chosen you." Elara wanted to believe it was only folklore, but folklore didn't leave claw marks deep as her hand in old pine trunks. She moved with her usual efficiency, trying to bury her unease under tasks, feeding the stove, checking the perimeter of her small cabin, setting coffee to boil. But silence here was deceptive. The forest held its own whispers. Something about yesterday had already begun to shift that silence. By mid-morning, she knew why. A sharp rap on the cabin door startled her. She hadn't had visitors in months. Her life was carefully arranged to avoid them. When she opened it, Sawyer Grant, the county's game warden, stood on her porch. He was broad-shouldered, weathered, with the cautious air of a man who spent most of his days among both predators and the people who hunted them. His smile was polite but didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, Miss Whitlock," he said. "Mind if I come in?" Elara gripped the doorframe. She thought of the shed behind the ridge, of the starving animal chained in the dark. "What's this about?" Sawyer lifted a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a printed photo, grainy but unmistakable. Her cabin, the outline of the shed, and, though blurred, the faint shape of the Cougar within. Beneath, a splashy caption, "Mountain lion in captivity." Elara's stomach dropped. "Where did you get that?" "Circulating online since last night. Some kid posted it to TikTok or Instagram." "Viral, they call it." He studied her expression. "Look familiar?" Her hands clenched. Talboon. She'd seen the girl around town before. Restless, wiry, always with her phone. "It's my property." "Trespassers don't ask permission." Sawyer's tone softened. "I'm not here to cite you, Elara, but you know the law. If there's a big cat in captivity, I have to check." Her throat tightened. For years, she had managed to live unseen, an exile in her own wilderness. Now a teenager's curiosity had undone it all. She considered lying, but Sawyer's gaze pinned her. He wasn't a man who missed details, and she'd always hated lying. It curdled something inside her. "Follow me," she muttered. The trail to the shed felt different now, heavy with exposure. Branches cracked under their boots, ravens shifted above in the pines, and every step brought the inevitable closer. Sawyer walked with the ease of someone used to long treks. He glanced often at Elara as though piecing together more than she said. "Funny thing," he remarked. "You drop off the map for years. Folks figured you didn't want company. Yet here you are, buying property at a tax auction." "Curious choice." Elara didn't answer. Her mind kept circling back to Tal's phone camera, to how fast secrets dissolved in the age of instant uploads. Her sanctuary was dissolving with it. When they reached the shed, the cougar's low growl vibrated through the boards before Sawyer even touched the door. He froze, muscles tightening. Damn, that's real. He swung the door wide enough to glimpse inside. The cougar rose unsteadily, chains rattling against iron stakes driven into the earth. Its ribs jutted like broken fence posts, its golden eyes glowing in the dimness. Sawyer swore under his breath. What the hell is this? Elara stepped forward before she could think. It was already here. When I bought the land, starving, I couldn't just... Her voice cracked. I couldn't let it die. Sawyer studied her sharply. You're a biologist, aren't you? Used to work with wildlife. Used to, she said flatly. He crouched near the door, eyes never leaving the animal. The cougar didn't lunge. Instead, it watched as if weighing them. Sawyer shook his head. This isn't natural. It's half dead, yet it hasn't torn itself bloody trying to get free. Someone wanted it alive. Question is, why? Elara's heart pounded. You tell me. You're the game warden. Sawyer rose, dusting his hands. His expression had shifted, shadows hardening his features. There've been whispers, trafficking rings, exotic animals moved through back channels, kept hidden until they're shipped out. Maybe someone stashed it here. The idea chilled Elara. Why sell the land then? Why leave it to starve? Could be a cover-up. Clear the evidence, let the wilderness swallow it. He turned his gaze on her. But then you bought it. Accident or not, you're part of this now. They stood in silence, the cougar's breath ragged behind them. Elara felt the old ache stir, the one she'd buried since the fire. She'd promised herself she would never be responsible for another life. And yet here it was, chained and starving, demanding her choice. Sawyer's tone softened again. Look, I don't think you put it here. But you can't keep it, Elara. It's dangerous, and the law won't look kindly on you harboring it. You should let me take it into custody. Her gut twisted. She imagined the cougar hauled away, caged in some sterile facility until it was euthanized. No dignity, no freedom. Just another secret erased. And what if I don't? Sawyer met her gaze evenly. Then I have to make it official. Reports, investigations, people you don't want sniffing around. The threat was subtle but real. She hated him for it, and hated herself for needing him more. That evening, back at the cabin, Elara sat by the stove staring into the flames. The cougar's eyes lingered in her mind, mirrored now in every flicker of orange. She thought of Talboon, reckless and curious, unleashing this storm with a photo. She thought of Mara's warning about the Watcher. And she thought of Sawyer, torn between duty and something else, something that suggested he knew more about trafficking than he admitted. Her sanctuary was unraveling. She could no longer hide in the wilderness, no longer pretend she was alone. The cougar had dragged her back into the world, into its cruelty and corruption. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Outside, the forest shifted. A twig snapped. A shadow crossed her window. Elara rose, heart pounding. She snatched her rifle from the wall and crept to the door. The porch was empty, only the whisper of wind in the trees. But when she turned back, a scrap of paper was wedged under the latch. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. 4 words, scrawled in rough charcoal. The silence after Sawyer's words pressed on Elara like snow-heavy branches. You're part of this now. She had known it the moment she found the cougar in that shed, though she had tried to resist admitting it. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. The animal's survival, or its death, was tied to her hands. Sawyer's jaw flexed as though he wanted to say more, but instead he stepped back, gaze scanning the trees. The forest hummed with quiet menace, the wind's whistle, the far-off call of a raven, the restless shift of pine needles. Elara could almost feel the cougar's stare burning through the walls behind her. Here's how this goes, Sawyer finally said. Officially, I log what I've seen. That's procedure. But if I do, this cat gets tranquilized, caged, and shipped out. If it's lucky. More likely it's put down. The word struck her chest. And unofficially? His eyes narrowed. Unofficially, I don't file it. I say I didn't find anything. But that leaves you with a choice, Whitlock. Keep it, feed it, nurse it back, though God knows why, or he let the alternative hang in the cold air. Elara crossed her arms tight, fighting the tremor in her hands. "Why would you give me that option?" Sawyer's voice hardened. "Because I've seen enough to know this isn't random. Somebody wanted this cat alive. Somebody still might. If I throw it into the system, we lose whatever trail there is. If I leave it with you, maybe we learn more. But you'd be carrying a burden most people wouldn't survive." A bitter laugh rose in her throat. "Survival is the only thing I've done," she wanted to say. Instead, she met his stare. "So it's me or nothing." Exactly. That night, the storm broke. Wind clawed through the pines, snow blew in hard sheets, and her cabin shook as if the mountain itself wanted to swallow it. Elara stoked the stove, her mind running circles. Sawyer had left with no promises, only a warning. "Keep your head down. Watch for signs you're not alone out here. Not alone." The phrase gnawed at her as much as the storm. She thought of Mara's words, "The Watcher has chosen you," and of the way the Cougar's golden eyes had locked on her with something beyond hunger. A chain of accidents had placed her here, yet it felt orchestrated, like she was a piece sliding into a larger puzzle. She carried venison scraps out to the shed, her lantern's light scattering across snowflakes. The Cougar crouched at the edge of shadow, ribs sharp as knives, but its eyes blazed steady. She tossed the meat inside. It didn't pounce. It ate with quiet precision, never looking away from her. The chain rattled only once, as if to remind her of its presence. "You shouldn't be alive," she whispered. But the Cougar simply chewed, silent and regal in its suffering. Days blurred into one another. The storm passed, leaving the forest white and brittle, every branch jeweled with ice. Elara kept to her routines, chopping wood, hauling water, boiling coffee, but now each task carried a double weight. She was living for herself and for the creature in the shed. Sawyer came once more unannounced, snow crusting his beard. He checked the animal's condition, his silence thick with calculation. "It's stronger," he admitted. "You've been feeding it well." "I don't see another choice," she said. He studied her. "There's always a choice." His gaze swept the trees, then he crouched near the shed's doorframe. "Tracks," he murmured. Elara followed his line of sight. Barely visible under the snow were boot prints, half filled but too fresh to ignore. Her pulse hammered. "Not yours?" He shook his head. "Too small. Somebody else has been here." Maybe more than once. Elara's stomach knotted. She thought of Tal Boone, the restless teenager with the phone. But these prints were wider, heavier, not a girl's. "Whoever it was," Sawyer said, "they're watching, testing how close they can get." He rose, his expression grim. "You're marked now, Whitlock. Remember that. Sleep became a fragile thing. Every creak of the cabin walls, every groan of the pines outside, set her awake with a hammering heart. Twice she thought she saw lantern light moving through the forest, flickering, then vanishing. She began carrying her old rifle everywhere, though she hated its weight, hated the memories it stirred. The Cougar, meanwhile, healed. Its coat regained a dull shine, its muscles knit back together, and its eyes, God those eyes, watched her with unnerving constancy. It no longer snarled when she entered. Sometimes it paced the length of its chain, deliberate, silent, as if measuring the distance between them. One evening she lingered too long. She had placed the meat down and turned to leave when the Cougar padded forward, slow and deliberate. It stopped inches from the chain's limit, head low, golden gaze fixed on her. Elara froze. Her breath plumed white between them. For a heartbeat, she felt as though the chain didn't exist, that nothing separated her from the raw, wild power of the beast. Then softly, it sat, just sat, staring at her like a sentinel. Her chest ached. She whispered, "Watcher." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Winter deepened. The world shrank to her cabin, the shed, and the vast silence between. Yet that silence was no longer empty. It pressed against her, full of unseen eyes. Sawyer's words circled her thoughts. Trafficking rings, hidden networks, predators more dangerous than the Cougar itself. Whoever had chained this animal hadn't vanished. They were waiting, and she was waiting too. For what? She didn't yet know, But each night when the wind scoured the mountain, she dreamed of fire and ash, of chains snapping, of a shadow moving beside her through the trees. The cougar had been left to die. Instead, it lived. And so, for reasons she couldn't yet name, did she? The snow came heavier in February, blanketing Elara's land until her cabin looked like an island rising from a frozen sea. Each morning she shoveled paths to the woodshed, to the waterhole she cut in the creek, and to the shed where the cougar lived. Each path felt like a tether. Her existence narrowed to these lines, scratched across a white expanse. The cougar had grown stronger. Its coat gleamed despite the cold, its body filling out where ribs once stuck through taut skin. But strength came with restlessness. The animal paced more, its muscles coiling like steel under fur, its chain rattling in sharp bursts. Elara watched the transformation with unease. She had saved it, yes, but to what end? When its body returned to full power, what then? A chain would not hold forever. And yet each time she opened the shed, the cougar's eyes met hers with a steady, unsettling calm, as though waiting for something neither of them could name. One dusk, Sawyer returned. His knock was curt, urgent. She opened the door to find him dusted in snow, his rifle slung across his back. "Got word," he said without greeting. "Someone's asking questions in town." "About you." "About this property." Her stomach clenched. "Who?" "Don't know. Not locals. Men with cash, no patience. They've been flashing photos, grainy stills of the cat. Same ones that went around online. They're looking to buy information." "Buy?" He nodded grimly. "Traffickers or buyers, hard to say which. Either way, they want that cougar." Elara felt the walls of her cabin close in. "So what do we do?" Sawyer set his jaw. "First, you stay inside at night. Second, you arm yourself. These aren't people who knock politely. They'll come quiet, take what they want, and leave you in the snow if you get in the way." Her pulse quickened. "You think they'll come here?" "They already have. Remember those prints?" He leaned closer, voice dropping. "They were scouts. Testing your defenses." Elara gripped the table's edge. The cougar wasn't just an accident left in her path. It was bait, a lure, a reason for dangerous men to enter her life. That night, sleep was impossible. Elara sat by the window with her rifle across her lap, the stormlight shifting across the snow outside. Now and then she swore she heard movement beyond the trees, branches cracking, snow crunching. But when she strained her ears, the forest fell still again. In the shed, the cougar paced. The sound of its claws on frozen ground echoed faintly through the night, a reminder that danger lived both inside and outside her borders. At dawn, she found new tracks near the creek, heavy boots half covered by wind-blown snow. Whoever it was, they had come close, too close. She forced herself not to panic. Instead, she carried wood to the shed and slipped inside. The cougar stopped pacing when she entered. It sat, watching her with that same unnerving calm. The chains stretched taut between them, but for the first time she thought she saw more than animal hunger in its eyes. "She saw intent, watcher," she whispered again. The word steadied her, though she didn't know why. The next week stretched taut as wire. Sawyer visited twice, always wary, always checking the tree line. He left supplies, extra ammunition, fuel and food, but his real gift was information. "They're patient," he told her on his second visit, "waiting for the snow to break. That's when they'll move. Easier to transport the animal in spring, so I'm supposed to just keep it alive until then?" He met her eyes. "Or decide otherwise. You could end this now. Unshot and you cut yourself free." Elara stiffened. The thought had haunted her too many nights. Yet every time she pictured raising the rifle, she remembered the animal's golden eyes in the dark shed. They did not beg, but they demanded. Not mercy, recognition. "I can't," she said quietly. Sawyer studied her long, then nodded once. "Then be ready." By mid-March, thaw had begun. Snow melted in rivulets along the slope. Ice cracked on the creek, and the air carried a damp, earthy smell. Along with it came movement in the forest. Too much movement. Elara noticed signs she had missed before. A broken branch cut too cleanly, cigarette ash stamped into snow, a glint of glass where binoculars had caught the sun. She wasn't alone. One evening, as she carried water back from the creek, she spotted smoke curling between the trees far to the north. A camp. Whoever they were, they no longer bothered to hide their presence. That night the cougar roared. Not a starving growl, but a full-bodied, thunderous cry that rolled through the mountains like an avalanche. Elara's blood ran cold. The forest had been marked, and the men who hunted would hear it. 2 nights later, the attack came. Elara was woken by the dogs barking, except she had no dogs. It took her a moment to realize the sound was not barking, but the cougar, its chained fury tearing through the dark. Then came the splinter of wood, the crack of a rifle outside, and her body surged into motion before thought could catch up. She grabbed her gun, yanked the lantern from the table, and burst into the night. Figures moved in the snow, shadows against the stormlight. 3, maybe 4. One near the shed, tugging at the door. Another with a rifle aimed at the chain. Elara raised her weapon and fired into the air. The shot cracked the night, echoing across the valley. "Get off my land!" she shouted. The men froze, then scattered, but not far. She could feel them circling, testing her resolve. The cougar lunged against its chain, teeth bared, eyes blazing. The sight stopped Elara's breath. For a moment, predator and woman stood side by side, facing the same enemy. She fired again, this time into the snow at their feet. One man cursed, another raised his gun, then a second shot rang out from the tree line, but not hers. Sawyer. He emerged from the woods, rifle steady, voice carrying like steel. "Next one goes through you." The intruders hesitated, then retreated into the dark, swallowed by the forest. Elara's chest heaved as the silence returned. The cougar, still straining against its chain, let out a final growl that faded into a low rumble, almost approval. Sawyer strode up, his expression hard. "They'll be back," he said simply. Elara stared at the cougar, at its unbroken defiance, and knew he was right. The storm wasn't over. It was only gathering. In the days that followed, tension threaded through everything. Elara repaired the shed door, reinforced her cabin windows, and set traps along the tree line. Sawyer visited often now, though he never stayed overnight. He claimed he couldn't risk being tracked here too long, but each time he left, the silence grew heavier. Elara felt herself changing. She had come here to disappear, to bury her past in solitude. But now she woke each day to battle readiness, her rifle always within reach, her eyes scanning for movement. And at night, when the cougar's steady breathing filled the shed, she felt less like its keeper and more like its counterpart. They were both being hunted, and together they would have to survive. March bled into April with a thaw that unsettled the Bitterroot Range. Snow retreated into dirty banks along the cabin's eaves, and the mountain silence filled with dripping meltwater, bird calls, and the restless stirrings of life awakening. But to Elara, the change in season felt less like renewal and more like an uncoiling. Something in the land was preparing to strike. The cougar's strength had returned fully now. Its coat was thick, muscles lean and taut, eyes sharp as amber fire. Each time Elara entered the shed, she felt less like a keeper and more like a trespasser. The chain no longer seemed a safeguard. It was a countdown. She had caught herself, on more than one occasion, imagining what it would do if free. Would it vanish into the timberline and never look back? Or would it turn, finish what instinct had always promised, and leave her broken in the snow? These thoughts did not terrify her as much as they once had. Instead, they unsettled her in stranger ways, because sometimes she almost longed for it. Sawyer arrived one evening, mud spattering his boots, his face drawn tight. "They've moved closer," he said as soon as she opened the door. Scouts were spotted near the road junction, 2 miles east. Her breath caught. "Spotted by who?" "By me," he said grimly. "I've been shadowing them. They're not amateurs. Military precision, satellite gear, radios. These are professionals, not just poachers. Which means someone with money is calling the shots." "Declan Rowe," she said, almost without thinking. Sawyer's eyes flickered. "You know that name?" "He sold me the shed," she admitted. $3. "He practically gave it away," Sawyer swore under his breath. "Christ, then he's at the center of it. This wasn't chance, Whitlock." They meant for that animal to be found or kept hidden until the right time. Elara felt anger flare like dry tinder. She had been used, manipulated into becoming the unwilling caretaker of something powerful and dangerous. What do they want it for? She demanded. Sawyer hesitated. Could be black market sales. Could be leverage. But there's more. Legends tied to this range. Rumors about the Watcher. People like Roe will exploit anything if it buys them influence. To some, this cougar isn't just an animal. It's a weapon or a symbol. The words chilled her. A weapon, a symbol. The thought had crossed her mind more than once when she looked into those molten eyes. 2 nights later, Elara heard footsteps outside. This time there was no mistaking them. Boots crunching snow, deliberate and unhurried. She blew out her lantern and crouched by the window, rifle steady. 3 figures moved near the tree line. One carried a light, muted red. They were mapping the property, noting weak points. She kept her breath shallow, her finger hovering near the trigger. Then came a sound that froze them all. The cougar's roar, a deep, primal thunder that rolled out of the shed and echoed through the valley. The men stopped, their light jerking in panic. One swore, the other motioned for silence. Then, as quickly as they came, they withdrew into the dark. Elara sagged against the wall, heart hammering. She realized then that the cougar had saved her. Its voice had driven them back. But how long until fear gave way to determination? Tal Boone arrived the next afternoon, stumbling up the muddy slope with her phone clutched tight. "Elara!" she hissed, cheeks flushed with cold. "You need to see this." Against her better judgment, Elara let the girl inside. Tal's phone glowed with a video clip. Grainy footage of her cabin, filmed from a distance, zoomed in on the shed. The caption read, "The Watcher lives." Views climbed in real time. Elara's blood went cold. "Where did you get this?" "Someone posted it to a forum," Tal whispered. "I don't know who, but it's spreading fast. People are calling it proof of the legend." Elara slammed the phone down. "Do you realize what you've done, bringing this here? You've just made this place a target." Tal's eyes shone with both fear and fascination. "But don't you see? It means the stories are true. My grandma used to say, the Watcher keeps balance in these mountains. Maybe that's why you found it, because you're meant to." Elara's throat tightened. Meant to. The word echoed Mara's cryptic warnings. Before she could respond, the cougar roared again from the shed. Tal gasped, frozen by the sound. "That's not a story," Elara snapped. "That's flesh and blood. And it's going to get us both killed if this keeps up." But even as she said it, part of her felt the girl was right. The days blurred with tension. She barely slept, her rifle by her side, the cougar's restless pacing marking the hours. Sawyer visited again, his worries sharper than before. "They're preparing something," he warned. "The way they've tightened their perimeter, it's only a matter of time. You need to decide now, either release it into the wild or..." His voice faltered. "Or kill it before they get their hands on it." Elara stared at him, fury rising. "You think I'll put a bullet in the one thing that survived alongside me this long? I think if you don't, Roe will take it alive. And what happens then will be worse than death." The cabin rang with silence. She looked out at the shed, snow melting into mud around it, the cougar's shadow moving behind the boards. "No," she whispered. "It's not ending like that." Sawyer's face hardened. "Then you'd better prepare for war." The attack came at dawn. Elara woke to gunfire, sharp cracks in the distance, followed by shouted orders muffled by trees. She snatched her rifle and rushed outside, breath steaming in the cold air. Smoke curled from the tree line. Sawyer burst from the woods, blood streaking his temple. "They're here!" he shouted. 5, maybe 6, armed to the teeth. "Roe's men!" Elara's heart pounded as bullets snapped into the snow around them. She ducked behind the woodpile, returned fire, and felt the raw, terrifying rush of survival take hold. From the shed came a roar so fierce it silenced the gunfire for a heartbeat. The cougar threw itself against the walls, the chain clanging like thunder. The men shouted, trying to push forward, but the sound rattled them. Elara took her chance, firing into the smoke. One man fell, another cursed and pulled back. Sawyer joined her, his shots precise and unyielding. Then come a splintering crack. The shed door burst apart. The cougar exploded into the open, chain trailing like a broken leash. Its golden eyes blazed as it leapt into the fray. The men screamed. Shots rang wild. Snow churned red. Elara watched in horror and awe. The beast was no longer caged, and in that moment she understood. The Watcher was not here to be kept or killed. It was here to judge. When silence finally fell, the ground was littered with blood and broken gear. The survivors had fled, leaving weapons and radios in their panic. Sawyer lowered his rifle, chest heaving. Elara stood frozen, her eyes on the cougar. Its coat was splattered dark, its muscles trembling with exertion. Yet it turned to her calmly, as though nothing had changed. Her breath caught. The chain was gone. There was nothing holding it now. The cougar blinked once, slow, deliberate. Then it padded toward the trees, vanishing into the morning fog without a sound. Elara's knees gave way. She sank into the snow, the enormity of what had happened crushing her chest. The Watcher was free, but freedom came at a price, and the men who survived would not stop until they reclaimed what they had lost. This was only the breaking point. The Bitterroot Range seemed to hold its breath after the cougar vanished into the fog. For days, the forest was unnaturally silent. No bird song, no crackle of twigs under deer hooves, only the wind sweeping over ridgelines. Elara felt that silence seep into her bones, heavy with expectation. She had thought the release would bring relief, an end to months of fear and confinement. Instead, it sharpened her dread. The cougar was out there, unchained and watching. The men Rose sent were still alive, and the land itself seemed to wait for the next strike. Sawyer stayed 2 nights after the attack, binding his wounds and repairing the shattered shed door. He was quiet, shoulders stiff, gaze darting to the trees as if expecting movement at every moment. On the 3rd morning, he stood at the cabin threshold, rifle slung and jaw set. "They'll regroup," he told her. "You need to leave." Elara folded her arms. "And go where? This is my land." "This isn't about land anymore," Sawyer said. "It's about survival. Roe won't stop until he has what he came for. That cougar humiliated him. He'll come back with more men, heavier firepower." Elara looked past him to the shed, to the claw marks etched deep into its timbers. "Leaving means they win, and it means I abandon what the Watcher protected. I won't do it." Sawyer hesitated, then sighed. "Then we make a stand. But you need allies." "Allies," he nodded. "People who know these mountains. People Roe can't buy." Elara thought of Mara Wynne, the herbalist who spoke in riddles and carried old knowledge like secrets stitched into her bones. And she thought of Tal Boone, reckless but brave, who believed the legends with a conviction Elara almost envied. Perhaps allies already existed. 2 days later, Elara hiked into the timberline with a pack full of dried venison and supplies. The cougar's tracks laced the snow-melt soft earth. They weren't wandering trails, but deliberate paths, circling the cabin's perimeter, watching. She felt eyes on her, though she saw nothing. At dusk, she found Mara's hut, smoke curling from its chimney. Mara met her at the door, with the same unreadable expression she always wore, a mix of mirth and warning. "You let it free," Mara said before Elara spoke a word. Elara blinked. "How did you—" "The mountain tells me," Mara said simply. She motioned her inside. By the fire's glow, Elara explained Roe's men, the siege, the cougar's explosive release. Mara listened without interruption, her fingers weaving sprigs of sage. "The Watcher chooses who may walk these slopes in peace," Mara murmured when Elara finished. "It chose you, Elara Whitlock, and now it's testing whether you are worthy." "I don't want to be chosen," Elara snapped. "Want has nothing to do with it." Mara's gaze pierced her. "The cougar will return. When it does, you'll know what to do." Elara swallowed her retort. She left with more questions than answers. Tal arrived at the cabin unannounced the next afternoon, breathless and mud-smeared. "They're here," she gasped. "Roe's men. I saw their trucks down at the old mining road." Elara cursed under her breath. That road led straight to the ghost town. Abandoned shafts, rotting shacks, and whispers of blood in the soil. "They'll use the town as a base," Sawyer said grimly. He had returned only hours earlier, unable to stay away. "Plenty of cover, old tunnels to stash weapons or cages." "Then we take the fight to them," Elara said. The words left her mouth before she realized how true they felt. Sawyer stared at her. "That's suicide." "It's survival," she countered. "We can't wait for them to come again. They'll burn this cabin down around us. We hit them first, cut their legs out before they can stand." Tal's eyes glittered with a reckless light. "I can help. Drones, cameras. I can map the town from above." Sawyer muttered something about children in war zones, but Elara silenced him with a look. "She's right. We need every advantage." That night, Elara barely slept. She dreamed of fire again, her daughter's face, smoke choking the sky, the sound of her own voice screaming in vain. She woke with tears frozen on her cheeks. For years, she had buried herself in these mountains to escape guilt, but now the past pressed in, demanding she choose between paralysis and purpose. When she stepped outside, dawn light cut through the mist. On the ridge above the cabin, a silhouette moved. Broad shoulders, long tail, eyes burning like twin embers. The cougar. It stood, watching her, then melted back into the trees. Elara felt resolve crystallize. The watcher had not abandoned her. It was leading her. They struck the ghost town at twilight. Elara, Sawyer, and Tal moved through ruined streets where clapboard houses sagged and rusted tools lay buried in weeds. The air stank of oil and decay. From one of the mining shacks came voices, laughter sharp and cruel. Sawyer motioned them low. "Half a dozen inside," he whispered. "More around the shafts, armed." Tal's drone buzzed overhead, its camera feeding to her phone. "They've got cages," she murmured. "Big ones, reinforced." Elara's stomach clenched. Cages meant Roe expected to recapture the cougar. She gripped her rifle tighter, not if she could help it. They waited until dark fully cloaked the town. Then Elara set the first charge. Sawyer had scavenged old mining explosives, unstable but still potent. She planted them along the northern shaft entrance. When the blast tore through the night, chaos erupted. Men shouted, scrambled. Lights flared. Elara and Sawyer opened fire from the shadows, cutting down two before the rest scattered. Tal directed them from above, her drone spotting movements, relaying positions. Then the cougar arrived. It erupted from the tree line with a roar that silenced even gunfire. Men turned in terror as it leapt among them, claws raking, jaws snapping, blood splattered broken boards. Elara moved through the chaos, a phantom of determination. Every step felt inevitable, as if she had trained her whole life for this moment. She found Roe near the largest shack, barking orders, fury etched across his face. Their eyes met. His narrowed in recognition. "You!" he spat. Elara raised her rifle. "Me!" she fired. The shot grazed his shoulder, spinning him back, but before she could fire again, one of his men tackled her. She fought, teeth bared, until Sawyer's bullet dropped the man. Roe vanished into the dark. The battle raged until midnight. By then, half the ghost town burned, cages twisted and empty. Roe's men were dead or fled, their operations shattered, but Roe himself had escaped. Elara stood in the ashes, chest heaving, rifle heavy in her hands. The cougar prowled at the edge of the firelight, its golden eyes unblinking. For the first time, it did not vanish when she looked. It lingered as if acknowledging her. Mara's words returned. The watcher chooses. Perhaps she had been chosen not just to guard the cougar, but to fight for what it represented, the wild's unbroken will. At dawn, the town lay in ruins. Sawyer leaned against a wall, bloodied but alive. Tal, exhausted, slept on a bedroll in the corner. Elara walked alone through the wreckage, her boots crunching glass and ash. The cougar followed at a distance, silent as shadow. She knew Roe would come again. Men like him always did. But for the first time since she bought that cursed shed, Elara no longer felt hunted. She felt ready. The reckoning had only begun. The ghost town smoldered through the night, flames chewing at ancient timbers until whole walls caved in. Sparks drifted skyward, dissolving into the black above. Elara stood among the ruins, rifle slack in her hands, face streaked with soot. The air reeked of ash and blood. Sawyer limped up beside her, blood seeping through a bandage at his thigh. "It's over, for now." Elara didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the tree line where the cougar had disappeared. It had come like a phantom of vengeance, scattering Roe's men, saving them in the crucial moment. But it had also vanished, leaving only claw marks and silence in its wake. Tal crouched near the remnants of the cages, her small drone perched on a collapsed beam. She traced the twisted steel with trembling hands. They were ready for it. Reinforced bars, weighted bases, shock latches. They meant to trap it alive. "They still might," Sawyer muttered. "Roe's not done. He'll regroup. Men like him always do." Elara lifted her head. The burning town groaned and cracked around them, embers painting their faces in shifting light. "Then so will we." The next morning, they buried the dead. Not Roe's men. They left them for the earth to reclaim, but their own fallen. A trap Sawyer hadn't seen had claimed Caleb, one of Mara's quiet apprentices who'd arrived at dusk to help. The loss carved deep into Elara's resolve. Mara herself arrived by noon, moving like a shadow through the blackened town. She knelt by the gravesite, her hands brushing ash from her skirts. "The mountain breathes easier now," she murmured, though her eyes were rimmed red. "But Roe still carries poison. Until he is cut away, the land will not heal." Elara stiffened. "You talk as if the mountain has a voice." "It does," Mara said softly, "and it speaks through the Watcher." Elara swallowed hard. Every mention of the cougar carried weight she couldn't quite bear. That night they retreated to the cabin. The sky cleared for the first time in weeks, stars blazing cold above the ridgelines. Around the fire, exhaustion hung thick. Tal dozed with her drone case clutched like a child's toy. Sawyer cleaned his rifle in silence, jaw clenched against pain. Elara stared into the flames. She remembered her daughter's laugh, sharp as wind chimes, the way fire had swallowed it years ago. The cougar's roar in the ghost town had carried the same finality as that blaze, a sound that split past from present, leaving her hollow and fierce all at once. Sawyer's voice broke the silence. "You shot him," her eyes lifted. "Roe?" He nodded. "Should have killed him when you had the chance." "I tried." "Try harder next time," Sawyer said, not unkindly. Elara clenched her fists. "Next time." The words tasted like iron. The days that followed stretched taut with waiting. The forest seemed both wounded and watchful, scarred by fire, yet alive with secrets. Mara returned to her hut, swearing she would listen to the whispers of the slopes. Tal patched her drone and mapped trails that led deeper into the range. Sawyer stayed close, sharpening blades, setting snares, restless as a wolf circling its own shadow, and Elara trained. She hiked ridges at dawn, rifle strapped tight. She learned the dips and choke points of every valley. She cut paths through thickets, memorized escape routes, marked vantage cliffs where one shot could halt a dozen men. At night she dreamed of the Watcher. Sometimes it stalked her cabin, eyes glowing from the tree line. Other times it padded silently at her side, a shadow twin, neither tame nor enemy. She always woke trembling, unsure whether the dreams were warnings or invitations. One evening, Tal burst into the cabin, cheeks flushed. "I caught him, on the feed." Elara and Sawyer crowded around her laptop. Grainy drone footage flickered. Across the screen, trucks moving along the mining road, headlights cut, tarps covering shapes in the beds. Too many to be ordinary hunters. Sawyer's jaw tightened. Roe! Elara's chest tightened too. She thought of the flames, the cages, the blood on her hands. She thought of her daughter, and she thought of the Watcher, waiting in the fog. "They're coming back," she whispered. Mara arrived the next day with a bundle of dried herbs and eyes grim as storm clouds. "The mountain stirs restlessly," she said. "Roe carries more than guns this time. He's made bargains, dark ones." Elara frowned. "What kind of bargains?" Mara didn't answer. She laid the herbs on the table, each stalk tied with red thread. "Protection," she said simply. "You'll need it." That night the cougar returned. Elara heard it before she saw it. A low rumble rolling across the ridgeline, not quite growl, not quite thunder. She stepped outside, breath misting in the cold, and there it stood, massive, regal, framed by moonlight. It did not move closer. It only watched. Elara's throat tightened. "You saved us." Her voice cracked on the words. "But what are you asking of me now?" The watcher blinked, a slow, deliberate gesture, then turned and vanished into the trees. Elara stood alone, the echo of its presence burning through her chest. The war was not over. Roe would return with new fury, armed with money, men, and whatever bargains Mara hinted at. The cabin would not withstand another siege. The mountain itself seemed poised on the edge of decision. Elara knew what it meant. The fight ahead would not just be for survival. It would be for the soul of the Bitterroot, for the Watcher, for her daughter's memory, for everything fire and fear had once stolen from her. As dawn crept across the peaks, painting the forest in pale gold, Elara whispered into the silence, "Let him come. This time we finish it." The Bitterroot Range felt different in the days after the ghost town burned. The air, once heavy with smoke and iron, carried a raw stillness. The forest seemed both wounded and alive, like a living thing that had survived a predator's strike, but still bled under its skin. Elara moved through it with the rifle slung across her back, every sense sharpened. She did not believe in omens, yet she felt them now, etched into the soil, whispered on the wind, written in the silence of birds who did not return. Roe was still alive. That truth gnawed at her like an unpulled thorn. Sawyer insisted they strike first. "He's regrouping," he said, laying maps across the cabin table. His limp was worse, but his voice was steady. "Men like Roe don't lick their wounds for long. They lash back." Tal leaned over the maps, tapping her pen against old mining roads. "He'll need supply lines. He can't hide forever." Mara spoke from the corner, weaving herbs into charms. "He will come not just with men. He courts forces beyond steel and powder. He thinks himself a conqueror of more than flesh." Elara frowned. "What forces?" "The kind that leave no tracks yet stain the air with rot," Mara replied, not looking up. "The kind a man desperate for control will bow to." That night, Elara dreamed of fire again. Only this time, her daughter's face dissolved into Roe's sneer, and behind him loomed the Watcher, its eyes glowing like molten embers. When she woke, her hands shook so badly she dropped the canteen. She stepped outside into the cold mountain dark. A sound stirred across the ridge. Not a growl, not a call, something deeper, primal, the earth itself groaning awake. The Watcher stood on the far slope, tail twitching, gaze locked with hers. "No malice, no mercy, only expectation," she whispered into the dark. "I'll finish it." Preparations filled the next week. Sawyer repaired weapons, his grim focus hiding his pain. Tal patched drones, programming them for silent flight. Mara brought them herbs that reeked of earth and ash, smearing symbols across their rifles with a paste she swore would confuse the sight of the mountain's enemies. Elara studied Roe. She gathered scraps from newspapers, whispers from hunters, fragments of rumor Mara somehow unearthed. He had pulled together mercenaries, men hungry for blood or desperate for pay. But worse were the whispers. Roe had been seen in the company of a figure draped in black, a woman whose eyes shimmered pale as bone. Tal scoffed when she heard. Myth and fear, nothing more. But Elara remembered Mara's warnings, and her gut told her Roe had reached for something beyond bullets. They found him at last on the southern slope, near Miller's Gorge. Tal's drone caught the first glimpse. Trucks hidden under camo netting, fires glowing low, shadows moving among makeshift tents. Dozens of men. And cages again, lined with jagged steel. Sawyer spat when he saw. He still thinks he can break the Cougar. Elara felt heat surge in her chest. The Watcher wasn't just a beast. It was something Roe could never possess, never contain. That was why he hunted it, because it refused to bow. "We strike tonight," she said. Sawyer stared. "With 3 rifles, a drone, and Mara's superstitions?" "With the mountain," Mara murmured, her eyes flashing. They descended at dusk. The gorge walls funneled the wind, carrying every sound. Elara's heart beat like a drum as they slipped into position. Tal on the ridge with her drone controls, Sawyer guarding the narrow pass, Mara whispering prayers to the earth. Elara crept closer, belly flat against the ground. She saw Roe by the fire, his arm bandaged, his face twisted in fury. Around him his men sharpened blades, cleaned rifles. The cages gleamed, baited with bloody haunches of meat. Then she saw her, the woman in black, pale eyes that caught the firelight strangely. She stood beside Roe, lips moving in words Elara could not hear. But the air around her rippled like heat over stone. A chill stabbed Elara's spine. Mara had been right. The attack began with Tal's drone dropping a small charge onto the nearest truck. The blast shattered silence, sending men scrambling. Sawyer opened fire from the pass, precise and unrelenting. Elara moved like a shadow through tents, rifle cracking, knife flashing. Then the Watcher arrived. It came with a roar that rolled through the gorge like thunder. Men screamed as it lunged among them, a blur of muscle and claw. Cages toppled, steel screeching against rock. The Cougar tore through mercenaries as if the earth itself had unleashed vengeance. Elara fought at its side without thinking, her shots echoing its strikes, predator and hunter moving in unspoken rhythm. But Roe did not run. He stood by the fire, pale-eyed woman at his side, and raised his rifle. His voice carried over the chaos. "It dies tonight, Whitlock," he fired. The shot grazed the Watcher's flank, drawing blood. The Cougar staggered, then roared so fiercely the ground seemed to quake. Elara's vision tunneled. She raised her rifle and took aim at Roe. The pale woman lifted her hand. Air warped, bending her bullet away. Elara froze, breath ragged. The fight stretched into madness. Men screamed. Fire spread. The Watcher bled yet fought, a whirlwind of fury. Mara stood firm in the pass, chanting louder than gunfire, her words cracking the air like lightning. Tal's drone dropped its last charge, collapsing a tent onto 3 men. Elara faced Roe across the fire. Their gazes locked, 2 lives bound by ruin. "You took everything from me," she spat. Roe sneered. "And I'll take more. That beast, this mountain, you'll see them broken under me." He raised his rifle again. Elara didn't flinch. "Not while I breathe," she fired. This time Mara's chant cut through the gorge like a blade. The pale woman faltered, her barrier shattering. Elara's bullet tore through Roe's chest. His eyes went wide, fury twisting into disbelief. He staggered, fell to his knees, and collapsed into the dirt. The gorge went still. The pale woman shrieked, a sound not of this world, then dissolved into the air like smoke snuffed out by wind. Silence fell heavy. The Watcher limped to Elara's side, blood staining its flank. Its eyes met hers, and for a breathless moment she thought she saw recognition, an understanding older than words. Then it turned, vanished into the trees, leaving only the echo of its presence. Elara lowered her rifle, breath shuddering out of her. Sawyer hobbled down from the pass, Tal scrambling after him. Mara walking as if every step was years heavy. "It's done," Sawyer rasped. Elara looked at Roe's body, then to the dark forest where the Watcher disappeared. "No," she whispered. "It's only begun," because she knew the Cougar was not just a guardian. It was a reminder, of fire, of loss, of survival, of the line between fear and reverence. And now that Roe was gone, that line belonged to her to walk. The Bitterroot breathed again, but its voice carried a promise. The mountain was watching. The gorge reeked of charred wood and oil long after the last ember died. What once had been Roe's empire, rows of trucks, iron cages, weapons stacked in crates, machines grinding at the mountain's belly, was now only a graveyard of twisted steel. The valley itself seemed stunned, as though uncertain whether to mourn or exhale. Elara stood where Ro had fallen. The soil was still damp, stained dark, though the skies had been dry. She remembered his face in the last instant, gun in his hands, hatred burning, stubborn life clinging even as his blood drained into the dirt. She had thought killing him would break something loose inside her, some knot of grief that had held her for years. But she felt only silence. What haunted her was not Ro's death, but the pale woman, that impossible figure, half flesh, half phantom, screaming as though torn from the marrow of the world itself. Elara could not shake the image of her vanishing into the tree line. Was she dead? Or had she simply returned to a place where human eyes did not belong? And always, in the back of her mind, the absence of the Watcher. The Cougar had saved them, torn Ro's plans apart, but limped into the dark when it was done. It had not returned. That emptiness pressed heavier than Ro's ghost. Sawyer refused to rest. His limp had worsened into a dragging shuffle, blood seeping through bandages, but still he hauled salvage from the wreckage. Ropes, tools, half-burned crates of food, all gathered with dogged persistence. His eyes burned with stubbornness stronger than his failing body. "You need to stop," Elara said. Her voice cracked with exhaustion. Sawyer didn't look up. "Stopping gets you dead. Work keeps you alive." Tal was changed too. Her usual sharp wit had gone, replaced by a brittle quiet. She touched the cages with trembling hands. Each time her fingers brushed steel, she winced. "They weren't for animals," she whispered one night, voice tight. "Not just animals, they were meant for children." "For people," Elara froze, stomach twisting. She had suspected, but hearing it aloud scraped raw something she'd buried deep. Mara drifted through the ruins with calm solemnity. She burned herbs in clay bowls, chanting prayers that sounded as old as stone. Smoke curled through the blackened timbers like incense. "The mountain breathes freer now," she said, "but scars linger. They always do." Elara's silence was its own shield. She felt words would break if she tried them. On the third dawn, something stirred her from sleep. She climbed the ridge, rifle slung across her back, and there it was. The Watcher sat against the rising sun, fur streaked with blood, ribs scarred, body gaunt, but upright. Its golden eyes met hers, steady, unblinking. Tal gasped when she joined her. "It came back." Mara's voice was a hush. It was never gone. The Cougar's gaze wasn't worship nor menace. It was a question. Would she drag Ro's war with her forever? Or would she let the mountain claim its silence? Elara could not yet answer. "They burned Ro's body," Sawyer insisted. "So he leaves no mark." Tal gathered wood with shaking hands. Mara sang low and guttural, a song in a tongue Elara did not know. Flames rose, licking skyward. Elara stood rigid as the body crumbled. She remembered another pyre years ago, her daughter's. The same crackle, the same bitter smoke, the same hollow wound in her chest. When the fire died, she stayed. She whispered into the dark, "You'll hurt no one else, not healing, but closure." Sawyer broke silence. "You can't stay. Men like Ro don't die with one corpse. Someone always fills the gap." Elara met his gaze. "So I run again?" "You survive." Tal shook her head. "If she leaves, they'll still come." "But if she stays, maybe they'll think twice." Elara looked to Mara. "The mountain knows its guardians," Mara said. "Some by blood, some by fire. You are both." The watcher's roar split the ridges, deep and resonant as if to answer. Elara returned to the old shed. This was where it had started, the starving cougar, caged and broken. Now the boards lay shattered, the air empty. She touched the wood. $3, she murmured. At the time it had felt like loss. Now she saw it differently. $3 had bought her not ruin, but rebirth. The fire that had taken her family had not destroyed her. It had forged her. For the first time in years, she did not feel hunted by ghosts. She belonged. A week later, Tal packed her bag. "I'll be back," she promised. "But people need to know. The world has to see what Rode tried to do. Truth can be dangerous," Sawyer said, warning in his voice. "Truth always is." Tal smiled, crooked but brave. "But if you can carry it, so can I," Elara nodded. Tal carried her old fire, her hunger to fight. The girl would take the story to the towns. Elara would stay, guardian of the mountain. Sawyer's body betrayed him daily. His steps faltered, his hands shook, his breath grew thin. "You'll die if you stay," Elara told him. He smiled, weary. "Then I'll die where I belong." His gaze softened toward the ridges. "I tried once, failed. You finished what I couldn't. That's enough." Elara clasped his arm. No pity, no romance, solidarity, two remnants of old wars. Finding fragile peace, on the last morning, Elara climbed barefoot to the summit. The watcher waited. For a heartbeat she thought it might kill her. But it stepped forward, brushed its great shoulder against hers, then moved past into the forest, a mark of kinship. Elara closed her eyes as dawn spilled across her. Her daughter's absence felt no longer like a wound, but a thread, woven into mountain, cougar, and breath. "I am still here," she whispered. This time not defiance, triumph. Winter came hard. Snow buried the scars of battle, but memory lingered. Elara cut firewood, checked snares, mended roofs. Mara taught her herbs that warmed blood, roots that healed frostbite. Sawyer lasted until the first thaw. They found him by the fire, eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. They buried him facing the ridge, so the first light of every dawn would fall across him. Tal returned with spring, weary but alive, her pack heavier with journals and maps. "They're listening," she said. "Not enough, but some. Enough to matter." Elara embraced her. She had grown leaner, harder, but her eyes still held hope. By summer, the cougar had become legend. Hunters whispered of eyes in the trees, miners of tools broken overnight, loggers of traps sprung empty. Some said the mountain itself had turned against them. Elara knew the truth. She saw claw marks near the ridges, paw prints where none should be. Sometimes when she woke before dawn, she felt eyes on her, golden and unblinking. She no longer feared them. One autumn, a boy arrived, barely 16, gaunt from travel, carrying nothing but a knife and a sack. He asked for Elara by name. "They say you protect people here," he said. His voice cracked. "They say you fought Roe." Elara studied him, heart heavy. She had not asked for disciples, but the mountains seemed to draw them anyway. She gave him bread. "You'll work if you stay." His eyes shone with something she had once lost and found again. Years passed. The valley healed. Grass reclaimed the gorge. Trees grew where fire had scorched. Children laughed near the cabin. Orphans, wanderers, strays, who found their way up the mountain and stayed. Elara aged, her hair silvering, but her gaze remained sharp. Mara grew frail, her chant softer, her steps slower. Tal returned again and again, bringing stories from the world beyond. Sometimes hope, sometimes warning, and always the watcher remained. Older, scarred, slower perhaps, but eternal. Its roar echoed across the ridges like a hymn. The world forgot Roe, as it forgets all tyrants in time. But the mountain remembered. Travelers told of a woman on the ridges, silver-haired, rifle at her shoulder, moving like shadow. They told of a cougar that watched from the cliffs, golden eyes gleaming in starlight. Some said they were the same spirit, woman and beast bound together. Elara did not care what names they gave. At night she sat by the fire, listening to the cougar's distant call. It no longer sounded like sorrow. It sounded like continuity. Roe was ash. The pale woman was gone. Sawyer rested in the earth. Tal carried the torch. The children thrived. The watcher endured, and so did she. Together they had become the mountain's guardians. Together they endured. Winter again. The valley lay hushed beneath white silence, snow weighing branches low, streams frozen into glass ribbons. Elara sat at the mouth of the cabin, her knees stiff, hands wrapped around a tin mug that steamed in the morning chill. Age had bent her spine, slowed her steps, but had not dimmed her eyes. From the ridge a sound carried, low, resonant, unhurried. The watcher's call. The cougar still roamed, scarred and grey now, yet no less a presence. Sometimes she glimpsed it in the tree line, sometimes only its prints at dawn. It had grown old as she had, yet still it endured. That truth filled her chest with quiet peace. The mountain had accepted them both, predator and woman alike. The children were grown now. Some had left, carving their way into distant towns, carrying with them tales of the valley and the woman who had stood against Roe. Others stayed, building homes near the gorge where new grass grew. Life had returned to the place where fire and death once ruled. Laughter echoed where screams had been. Tal still visited, though streaks of grey wove through her hair and lines of travel marked her face. She carried books now instead of weapons, words instead of fire. She would sit beside Elara and speak of cities that had begun to change, of people who learned to listen, however slowly. Truth had outlived fear. One evening, as stars pricked the sky, Tal asked, "Do you ever wonder if it was worth it?" Elara thought of her daughter gone to flame, of Sawyer's weary smile, of Mara's songs, of Roe's empire burned to ash, of the watcher always near. She breathed deep of pine smoke and snow. It was the only path, she said. Worth it or not, it was ours. Tal nodded, eyes wet, and reached for her hand. When spring came, Elara's strength waned. She walked the ridges less, spent more time near the fire. Yet on one bright morning, when the air smelled of thawing earth, she rose and made her way, slow but steady, up the familiar trail. At the summit, she found the watcher waiting. They stood together in silence, woman and beast, the sun painting the peaks gold. Then the cougar lifted its head and loosed a cry that rolled across the valleys, a sound that seemed to bind past to future. Elara closed her eyes, letting the echo wash through her bones. She felt no fear, only belonging, only peace. That night she did not wake. In the years that followed, travelers spoke of the ridge where a great cougar still roamed, and of a woman whose spirit walked beside it. Some said the two were guardians, others said they were one and the same, but the mountain did not explain. It simply carried their song, wind through pines, echo through stone, forever enduring, and in that song, Elara lived on. The seasons turned, as they always had, but something had shifted in the high country. The cougar that prowled the ridge moved with purpose beyond survival, pausing at certain overlooks where no prey gathered, sitting vigil at dawn in clearings where the mist rose like breath from the earth. Hunters who ventured too far up the mountain reported strange occurrences. Traps sprung empty. Trails that seemed to lead somewhere suddenly circling back on themselves. And always, in the corner of vision, the tawny shadow moving between trees, watching, waiting, ensuring they turned back before crossing some invisible threshold. The first to truly understand was a girl named Maya, barely 16, who fled into the wilderness with a backpack and a heart shattered by loss. Her brother had died that spring, sudden, senseless, a moment of inattention on a highway, and the world below had become unbearable, thick with sympathetic glances and words that meant nothing. She climbed without destination, driven only by the need to escape the suffocating weight of other people's grief. She collapsed at sunset near a lightning-struck pine, too exhausted to cry anymore, too numb to care about shelter or food. That was when she heard it. The low, thrumming call that seemed to emanate from the mountain itself. Not a threat, but an acknowledgement. I see you. I know. The cougar appeared as the last light bled from the sky, massive and magnificent, its eyes holding depths that no animal should possess. Maya should have been terrified. Instead, she felt the first thread of something other than anguish weave through her chest. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. The cougar regarded her for a long moment, then turned and padded several yards away before looking back, waiting. Maya understood. She followed. They walked through the night, the great cat leading her along paths that seemed to materialize beneath her feet. And as they climbed, Maya began to sense it. Another presence, walking alongside, though nothing visible moved through the darkness. A companionship that felt ancient and understanding. A spirit that knew intimacy with loss and transformation. By dawn, they reached the ridge, the same place where Elara had once stood. The cougar settled onto the stone, and Maya sank down beside it, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from its fur. She felt no fear, only the strange, profound sense that she was exactly where she needed to be. She died here, didn't she? Maya asked the silence. The woman they talk about, Elara. The wind rose, stirring the pines into song, and Maya could have sworn she heard a voice woven through it, not died, became. Understanding bloomed slowly like sunrise. Elara hadn't ended on this mountain. She had finally, fully begun. She had shed the weight of a world that no longer fit, released the form that confined her, and merged with something older, truer. The cougar was both companion and vessel, guardian and home. They were separate and together, distinct and unified, bound by something deeper than flesh or name. "I'm not ready," Maya breathed. "I'm not ready to let go like that." The presence she felt seemed to shift closer, and in her mind, or perhaps her heart, understanding flowed like water. "You don't have to be, but you can rest here. Stay as long as you need." So Maya stayed. Days became weeks. She learned to move through the high country with the cougar as her guide, finding shelter in caves, gathering berries and wild herbs, drinking from streams so cold they made her teeth ache. The mountain held her in its ancient hands and asked nothing but presence. The cougar watched over her with patient eyes, and sometimes, in the gentlest moments, Maya felt a woman's hand smooth her hair, though nothing touched her but wind. Slowly, painfully, she began to heal, not by forgetting. She would never forget her brother, would carry him always, but by learning to hold grief and beauty in the same breath. To understand that love persists even when the beloved is gone. The mountain taught her this. Elara taught her this, in wordless whispers and moments of profound stillness, When autumn came, painting the aspens gold, Maya woke one morning knowing it was time. The cougar sat waiting at the cave entrance, and beyond it, the world below spread out in tapestried valleys, no longer threatening, no longer impossible. "Thank you," Maya told the mountain. The cougar, the spirit that dwelled between them. "I understand now. I'm ready to go back." The cougar approached and pressed its great head against her shoulder, a benediction, a farewell. And for just an instant Maya saw her, Elara, radiant and whole, wearing the mountain-like skin, her eyes full of starlight and stone. She smiled, and Maya understood that she would never be alone, not really. That love echoes, that spirits endure, that the world is far stranger and more compassionate than anyone suspects. Maya descended the mountain that day, but she carried it with her. She returned to the broken world, but she was no longer broken. And in the years that followed, she became the one who listened when others couldn't bear their grief, who walked with them through darkness, who reminded them that transformation is possible, that there are guardians in wild places, that the dead are never as distant as we fear. And sometimes when the burden grew too heavy, she would drive to the trailhead and hike up through the pines, climbing until the air grew thin and the world fell away. The cougar always found her. The presence always welcomed her home. The mountain kept its secrets and its songs. Elara walked its ridges in forms beyond counting, in wind, in stone, in the eyes of the great cat that watched over those who needed watching. She was the mountain's memory, its mercy, its proof that endings and beginnings are often the same threshold. Crossed in darkness and emerged from in light, and her song continued, carried on every wind, echoed in every stone, forever calling those who were lost, forever guiding them home. The legend spread quietly, the way true things often do. Not through proclamation, but through whispered confidences, through stories shared around campfires and kitchen tables. Maya was not the last to climb the mountain seeking answers. Others came, drawn by grief or desperation, by questions too large for the lowlands to hold. A widow who could not sleep for missing her husband's warmth. A veteran whose hands shook with memories of violence. A mother who had lost a child and could not remember how to breathe without pain crushing her ribs. They came alone, always alone, following some instinct deeper than maps or reason. Not all of them found the cougar. The mountain was discerning in its mercy, revealing itself only to those who truly needed sanctuary, not escape. Those who came seeking easy answers or magical erasure found only wilderness, beautiful, indifferent, ordinary. They descended unchanged, sometimes angry, often confused, wondering what they'd expected to find. But those whom the mountain claimed, those who the cougar deemed ready, they returned transformed. Not fixed, never that. Healing is not the same as erasure. But they carried themselves differently afterward, moved through the world with a quietness that suggested they'd learned something essential about the nature of impermanence and love. Maya documented what she could, filling journals with interviews, with patterns she began to recognize. The mountain seemed to work in cycles, in seasons of gathering and release. In spring, the cougar was seen most often, as if Elara's spirit grew restless with the thaw, eager to walk the greening world. In winter, sightings ceased almost entirely, though some swore they heard that rolling cry echoing through snowstorms, a reminder that even dormancy is a form of presence. Scientists came eventually, drawn by the reports of an unusually large cougar displaying aberrant behavior. They set up cameras, tracked movement patterns, collected scat and fur samples. The data confounded them. The genetic markers suggested an age impossible for the species. The territory it claimed was far larger than any solitary cougar should maintain, and the way it moved, purposeful, almost deliberate, as if following routes determined by intention rather than instinct. "It's like it's patrolling," one researcher said, frowning at her maps. "Protecting something. They never captured it on their cameras, in the places that mattered most, the lightning-struck pine, the ridge where the sun painted the peaks gold. Those spaces remained sacred, inviolate, held in trust by something the instruments could not measure." Maya visited those places often, bringing offerings sometimes, wildflowers, small stones, words written on paper that the wind claimed and carried away. She felt foolish occasionally, but the feeling never lasted, because each time without fail she felt the response, a warmth in her chest, a knowing that transcended language, the sensation of being seen completely and accepted wholly. On the 10th anniversary of Elara's transformation, Maya hiked to the ridge at dawn. The cougar was waiting, older now, silver threading through its tawny coat, but still powerful, still watchful. It approached her without hesitation, and Maya buried her fingers in its thick fur, feeling the heartbeat beneath, steady, strong, eternal. "Are you happy?" Maya whispered. "Wherever you are, whoever you've become, are you at peace?" The cougar rumbled, a sound like distant thunder, and pressed its forehead to hers. In that contact, Maya felt everything. The vastness of the mountain, the patience of stone, the wild freedom of wind through passes, and beneath it all, Elara's ineffable joy. Not happiness as humans measure it, but something larger, completeness, belonging. The profound rightness of having finally found her true form. When Maya opened her eyes, tears streaming, the sun had risen fully, and the world blazed with light. She was not alone. She had never been alone, and the mountains sang on. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.